The sky turned dark at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. Not dark like clouds or a storm. Dark like something was blocking the sun itself. Park was sitting in his small office in Seoul when the lights flickered. He was 67 years old, a retired admiral who spent his days reading old military reports and drinking cheap coffee. His phone rang. Then it rang again. Then every phone in the building started ringing at once. He walked to the window and looked up. His coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. Ships, massive ships. They hung in the sky like mountains made of metal and light. He counted 12 just above the city. Later, he would learn there were 500 of them spread across Earth. 500 ships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Every screen on the planet flickered at the same moment. Every television, every phone, every computer showed the same image. A creature appeared. It was tall, maybe 3 meters, and its body seemed to be made of living crystal. Light moved inside it like blood through veins. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. Species 7291. You are now claimed by the Dominion. We have watched your development. We have measured your worth. You will kneel. You will submit your resources. You will surrender your population for labor redistribution across our empire. You have one rotation of your planet to comply. Failure to submit will result in extinction. This is not negotiation. This is notification. The screen went black. Park stood very still for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and made a call he had hoped he would never have to make. Across the world, chaos spread like fire. People ran through streets. Governments held emergency meetings. Military commanders looked at their weapons and knew the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. Earth had 42 patrol ships, small ships, ships built for chasing pirates and protecting mining operations in the asteroid belt. Against 500 alien warships, they were nothing, less than nothing. In New York, the United Nations held an emergency session. Leaders screamed at each other. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some just sat in silence, their faces empty, already accepting death. But in a mountain bunker deep beneath Province in Korea, something different was happening. Park arrived by helicopter just as the sun was setting. Armed guards checked his identification 3 times. He walked through doors made of steel 2 meters thick. He took an elevator down into the earth. When the doors opened, he stepped into a room that officially did not exist. 7 people waited for him. The Council of 7, they called themselves. No government knew about them. No intelligence agency had ever found them. For 120 years they had kept a secret. The biggest secret in human history. A young woman stepped forward. Her name was, and she was a quantum engineer. She had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red, her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Admiral Park, it's time." Park nodded slowly. He had known this day might come. He had trained for it. He had nightmares about it, but some part of him had always hoped it would remain just a nightmare. "Show me," he said. Led him to a massive screen. She typed commands into a computer. The screen lit up with an image that made Park's heart stop. Ships, thousands of ships, but these were not alien vessels. These were human ships, black ships that seemed to drink in the light around them, warships with weapons that looked like the teeth of giants, carriers that could hold 1,000 smaller attack craft, dreadnoughts with running the entire length of their hulls. 2,400 ships, said quietly, built over 158 years, crewed and ready. Park stared at the screen. His mind struggled to accept what his eyes were seeing. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible? Where have you been hiding them?" Change the image. Now the screen showed something else. A hole in space. A circle of swirling light hidden in the shadow of Ceres, the largest object in the asteroid belt. "A wormhole," she explained. "We found it in 2189. Natural, stable. It leads to a star system 4,000 light-years from Earth. We've been building there ever since. in secret just in case. Park understood now. For over a century, humanity had been preparing for this exact moment. Not because they knew aliens would come, but because they knew that someday, something might threaten their home. And humanity had decided in secret that they would never be helpless. "Why wasn't I told?" he asked. "I was an admiral for 30 years. "Only 7 people know at any time," said. "When one dies, another is chosen. We could not risk the secret spreading. If anyone had found out, if any government had tried to use these ships for their own power." She shook her head. "The ships were built for one purpose only, to defend Earth against extinction." Park turned back to the screen. He looked at those black ships, those silent weapons waiting in the dark. "Can they win?" he asked. Was quiet for a moment. "We don't know. We've never seen alien technology before today. But our ships are not built for patrol or defense. They're built for war. Real war. Every weapon, every system, every piece of armor was designed by engineers who asked one question: what would kill us, and how do we become that thing instead?" Park nodded slowly. He thought about the alien's message: kneel, submit, surrender. He thought about his, probably terrified right now, watching the sky and waiting to die. He thought about every human who had ever lived, every struggle, every war, every small moment of beauty and pain that had brought their species to this point. Then he made his decision. "Wake the Armada," he said. "All of it, every ship, every crew, every weapon we have." His hands moved across the keyboard. Somewhere, 4,000 light-years away, lights began to turn on. Engines that had waited for over a century began to warm. Crews who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come received a single message. It was time. Park looked at the screen one last time. Then he turned and walked toward the communication center. He had a message to send, not to the aliens, to Earth, to every person watching the sky in fear. "Hold on," he would tell them. "Help is coming. We are not helpless. We have never been helpless. We just needed you to believe we were." 4,000 light-years from Earth, in a star system that had no name, stood on the observation deck of Forge Station Prime and watched the impossible. Ships, so many ships that her eyes could not count them all. They hung in the darkness like sleeping giants, their black hulls absorbing every bit of light that touched them. From this distance, they looked like holes in space itself, places where the stars simply stopped existing. Was 29 years old. She had been born on this station, in this nameless system, raised by parents who had also been born here. 3 generations of her family had lived and died in this secret place, building ships for a war that might never come. Now it had come. Her communicator beeped. She touched the small device on her wrist and heard the voice of her first officer, a serious man named. "Captain, the crew is assembled. All 890 personnel are at their stations. The ship is ready." "I'll be there in 5 minutes," she said. She took one last look at the fleet, 2,400 warships, the biggest secret humanity had ever kept. She had always known the ships existed. She had trained on them, lived on them, prepared for this moment her entire life. But seeing them all activated at once, their running lights glowing red in the darkness, their engines beginning to hum with power that could crack planets, it made her heart beat faster. She walked through the corridors of the station toward the docking bay where her ship waited. Along the way, she passed hundreds of crew members rushing to their positions. Some were young, barely 20 years old. Others were veterans who had spent 50 years preparing for this day. All of them had the same look in their eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else, something that looked like relief. The waiting was finally over. Reached her ship and stopped for a moment to look at it. The dreadnought Silence of Tyrants was one of the largest vessels in the fleet, 800 meters long, armed with that could fire tungsten rods at 12% the speed of light. It carried 200 attack drones, 50 missiles with nuclear warheads, and enough armor to survive a direct hit from a small asteroid. But what made it truly dangerous was not its weapons, it was its skin. The hull was covered in a material that had taken humanity 40 years to develop. It absorbed radar, light, heat, and every other form of radiation. On sensors, the ship simply did not exist. You could only see it with your eyes, and by the time you saw it, it was usually too late. She walked up the boarding ramp and entered her ship. Crew members saluted as she passed. She nodded to each of them, trying to remember their names, their faces. Some of them would die in the coming battle. She knew this. They knew this. But none of them looked away. None of them asked to leave. The bridge was a large circular room at the heart of the ship. Screens covered every wall, showing data from sensors, weapons, engines, and life support. 20 officers sat at their stations, their fingers moving across controls they had practiced using for years. Stood from the captain's chair when she entered. He was 42 years old, tall and thin, with gray already showing in his hair. He had served under her for 6 years. "Captain on the bridge," he announced. Everyone stood at attention, waved for them to sit. "Status report," she said. "All systems operational," replied. "Weapons charged, engines at full power. The wormhole transit window opens in 37 minutes." Sat in her chair and looked at the main screen. It showed the wormhole, that strange circle of light that connected this hidden place to home. In 37 minutes, she would lead her crew through that hole in space and face an enemy they had never seen. She pressed a button on her chair and opened a channel to the entire ship. "This is Captain," she said. "I know many of you are afraid. I am afraid too. We have spent our lives preparing for something we hoped would never happen. We have trained, studied, and sacrificed so that humanity would never be helpless against the darkness between stars." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Today that darkness has come. An enemy has arrived at Earth and demanded that our people kneel. They have threatened our families. They have threatened our world. They believe we are weak. They believe we are primitive. They believe we will break." Her voice grew stronger. "They are wrong. They do not know what we are. They do not know what we have built in this secret place. They do not know that for 150 years, the best minds of humanity have worked in silence to create something that no alien empire could ever imagine." She stood from her chair. "We are the Black Armada. We are the answer to every threat that has ever looked at our pale blue dot and thought it would be easy prey. Today, we show the universe what happens when you threaten our home." She looked around the bridge at her crew. Young faces, old faces, scared faces, determined faces, all of them watching her, all of them waiting. "We don't kneel," she said quietly. "We never kneel." The bridge was silent for a moment, then began to clap. One by one, every officer on the bridge joined him. The sound spread through the ship as the message was repeated over internal speakers. Soon, 890 voices were shouting the words that would become their battle cry. "We never kneel, we never kneel." Sat back down, her heart was pounding, her hands were steady. "Navigation," she said calmly, "set course for the wormhole. All ships form up on the silence of tyrants. We transit in 35 minutes. On the main screen, she watched the other ships begin to move. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts. 2,400 vessels of war, painted black as the space between stars, carrying the hope of an entire species. His voice came through from Forge Station. "Captain, Admiral Park has arrived at Earth Defense Command. He's coordinating with the surface forces. He wants you to know that the people of Earth are watching the sky and praying." "Tell them to save their prayers," replied. "We don't need prayers, we have." She allowed herself a small smile. "Take us through," she ordered. "Take us home." The wormhole opened before them like a door made of light. One by one, the black ships of humanity's secret fleet entered and vanished, crossing 4,000 light years in the blink of an eye. The Dominion had no idea what was coming. The supreme arbiter of the Dominion stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched Earth turn slowly below. It was a pretty planet, he thought, blue and green and white, wrapped in a thin shell of atmosphere, fragile, helpless. His name was impossible for human mouths to pronounce. He had lived for 300 years and conquered 47 worlds. He had crushed species that humans could not imagine. Some had been peaceful. Some had been warriors. All of them had fallen before the Dominion. This little blue world would be no different. Supreme Arbiter, his censor officer reported, the deadline expires in 6 of their hours. Their government leaders are still arguing among themselves. They have not responded to our demands. The Supreme Arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. Of course they haven't. Primitive species always hope for a miracle at the last moment. They pray to whatever gods they believe in. They convince themselves that somehow something will save them. He turned to face the massive window that showed his fleet. 500 warships, spread across Earth's orbit like a net. Each one could destroy a city in seconds. Together, they could turn the planet's surface to glass in less than a day. When the deadline passes, he said, destroy one of their major population centers. Let them see what defiance costs. They will kneel soon enough. His officers bowed their crystalline heads in agreement. Then the censor officer made a strange sound. A sound the Supreme Arbiter had never heard from one of his crew before. It was high and sharp, almost like a scream. Supreme Arbiter, the officer said, his voice shaking, I'm detecting something. What? Ships, enemy ships, thousands of them. The Supreme Arbiter turned to the main display screen. For a moment he saw nothing, just empty space, the darkness between Earth's moon and the planet. Then shadows began to move. They emerged from behind the moon like ghosts, black shapes against black space, visible only when they blocked the distant stars. 1 ship, 10 ships, 100 ships, they kept coming, pouring out of the darkness in formations so precise they looked like living things. The Supreme Arbiter felt something cold spread through his crystalline body, something he had not felt in 300 years. Fear. How many, he demanded. How many ships? The censor officer's hands trembled as he worked his controls. I cannot. Supreme Arbiter, my sensors cannot detect them properly. They appear as voids, empty spaces where nothing exists, but visual tracking shows 2,400 vessels, possibly more. 2,400 ships. The Supreme Arbiter stared at the screen in disbelief. His intelligence reports had said the humans had 42 patrol craft, 42 small ships barely worth noticing. Where had these come from? How had they hidden them? How was this possible? A communication signal cut through the silence, a human voice speaking in perfect. This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Defense Force. We have received your message demanding our surrender. After careful consideration, we decline your generous offer. You have threatened our world. You have frightened our children. You have made a very serious mistake. The Supreme Arbiter found his voice. You cannot win this battle, human. Even with your hidden fleet, you are facing the Dominion. We have conquered thousands of worlds. You are nothing. Perhaps, the human admiral replied. His voice was calm, almost friendly. But we are nothing that has been preparing for this moment for 150 years. We hoped we would never need these ships. We hoped we would meet friends among the stars. Instead, we met you. The line went silent for a moment. Leave now, Admiral Park said. This is your only warning. Leave now and you may survive. The Supreme Arbiter laughed, actually laughed. The sound echoed across his command deck. You threaten us. You threaten the Dominion. You will die screaming, human, all of you, every single. He never finished the sentence. On the destroyer Children of Earth, Lieutenant pressed the firing button. She was 24 years old. She had grown up before being recruited into the secret program at age 15. For 9 years, she had trained on weapons that most humans did not know existed, that could accelerate metal to impossible speeds, missiles that could think for themselves, weapons designed by engineers who understood that someday humanity might face something terrible. Today was that day. The fired 12 tungsten rods, each one the size of a telephone pole, accelerated to 12% the speed of light. They crossed 40,000 kilometers in 1.3 seconds. The carrier Bright Conquest, 3 kilometers long and carrying 50,000 crew, had no time to react, no time to raise shields, no time to pray. The tungsten rods hit like the fist of an angry god. They punched through armor that had never been broken. They continued through the ship's interior, destroying everything they touched. They exited the other side and kept going, finally losing their energy somewhere past Mars. The Bright Conquest did not explode. It simply came apart. 3 kilometers of advanced alien technology turned into 3 kilometers of spinning debris in less than 2 seconds. Across the Black Armada, 2,400 ships opened fire. The battle lasted 19 minutes. They fought back. They were not cowards and their weapons were powerful. 63 human ships were destroyed. 8,000 human crew members died. But for every human ship that fell, 5 ships were torn apart by fire, swarmed by attack drones, or gutted by nuclear missiles that appeared from nowhere. The black ships moved like shadows, impossible to track, impossible to target. They struck from angles they could not predict, from distances they could not believe. Human tactics were unlike anything the Dominion had faced, aggressive, reckless, absolutely without mercy. Captain led the silence of tyrants directly into the center of the enemy formation. Her ship absorbed hit after hit, its armor holding, its weapons never stopping. She destroyed 11 enemy vessels personally, including 2 that were trying to flee. "No one leaves," she ordered her crew. "Anyone who tries to run, destroy them. Let them understand that they cannot escape what they started." When the firing finally stopped, 340 ships were debris. The remaining 160 survivors activated their faster-than-light drives and fled, their engines screaming as they ran from a species they had called primitive. Admiral Park watched them go on his command screen. His face showed no joy, no celebration. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "They'll bring everything they have." His voice came through the communicator. "Let them come, we'll be ready." Park nodded slowly. He looked at the wreckage floating in Earth's orbit. Human ships and alien ships mixed together in death. 8,000 human souls gone. It was not a victory, it was a beginning. "All ships," he announced, "recover our dead, then prepare for what comes next. The real war starts now." On Earth below, people who had been waiting to die looked up at the sky in wonder. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew that the alien ships were fleeing and new ships, human ships, now protected their world. Hope had returned. But Park knew the truth. Hope was not enough. They needed to finish this. They needed to make sure no one ever threatened Earth again. And that meant taking the war to the stars themselves. 3 months after the first battle, Commander stood on the bridge of the carrier Silent Thunder and looked at a world that had never seen humans before. The planet below was called 3, and it was one of the Dominion's most important shipyard worlds. Massive orbital stations circled it like rings, each one capable of building warships. According to intelligence gathered from captured databases, this single planet produced 200 new vessels every year. "Not anymore." "All wings launch," ordered. He was 41 years old, a tactical genius who had spent 20 years studying every war humanity had ever fought. He had read about ancient battles where smaller armies defeated larger ones. He had learned about surprise attacks, about striking where the enemy did not expect, about the importance of moving fast and hitting hard. Now he was using all of that knowledge against an alien empire. 600 attack craft launched from his carrier and the 5 carriers that accompanied him. They were small, fast, and deadly. Each one carried a single pilot and enough weapons to destroy a station. They streaked toward Three's orbital shipyards like a swarm of angry insects. The defenders scrambled to respond. They had not expected an attack here. The front lines were supposed to be near Earth, where the main fleets were gathering. No one had imagined that humans would be bold enough, or crazy enough, to strike directly at Dominion territory. They were learning that humans were both bold and crazy. Watch the battle on his tactical display. Each blue dot was one of his pilots. Each red dot was an enemy. He gave orders calmly, directing his forces like pieces on a game board. Wing 3 focus on the eastern station. Wing 5 cover their approach. Wing 7, enemy fighters coming from the surface intercept them. Explosions lit up the space around 3. One by one, the orbital shipyards began to burn. Defense ships arrived, but they were too few and too late. By the time the human attack craft returned to their carriers, 4 of the 6 stations were destroyed and the other 2 were badly damaged. Mission complete, announced. All ships prepare for jump. Next target, the fuel depot at 7. This was humanity's new strategy. Instead of waiting for the Dominion's massive fleet to arrive at Earth, they had decided to attack first. Strike fast, hit important targets, keep the enemy off balance. The wormhole near Ceres allowed human ships to move across the galaxy in ways they could not predict. One day, human ships would attack a mining colony. The next day, they would destroy a communication relay 1,000 light-years away. The day after that, they would ambush a supply convoy. The Dominion had 12,000 ships preparing to attack Earth, but ships needed fuel, ships needed repairs, ships needed supplies, and humans were destroying all of those things. Meanwhile, on the agricultural moon of Prime, Sergeant Han led the first human ground assault on alien soil. She was 26 years old, small but fierce, with sharp eyes and faster reflexes. Her squad of 20 Marines wore power armor that made them stronger and tougher than normal humans. They had trained for years to fight enemies they had never seen. Now they were seeing those enemies up close. Warriors were terrifying. 7 feet tall, their crystalline bodies hard as stone, their weapons firing bolts of energy that could burn through metal. They had conquered 800 worlds. They had never lost a ground battle. Han watched 3 of her Marines die in the first 30 seconds of combat. Energy bolts punched through their armor like it was paper. She saw her friend, a young man named O, fall with a hole in his chest. For a moment she felt fear, real terrible fear. Then she felt something else, anger. "Covering fire," she screamed. "Move to the left flank, use the buildings for cover." Her remaining Marines obeyed. They were not as strong as their armor was not as good, but they were smart and they were fast and they were furious. Han discovered something important that day. They were powerful, but they were not creative. They fought the same way they had always fought. They stood in formations. They advanced in straight lines. They did not adapt. Humans adapted. She led her squad through the ruined streets of the colony, using every trick she knew. They set traps. They created distractions. They attacked from unexpected directions. When a warrior turned to face one threat, another Marine would shoot it in the back. By the time reinforcements arrived, Han's squad had killed 47 warriors. They had lost 7 of their own. Terrible losses, but something remarkable had happened. Humans had proven they could fight the Dominion on the ground and win. Back at Earth, Doctor was working on something even more important. She had not slept properly in months. Her laboratory at Forge Station Prime was filled with equipment that most scientists could not understand. She was trying to do something that should have been impossible: weaponize the wormhole itself. The wormhole worked by folding space. 2 points that were far apart could be connected, allowing instant travel between them. This idea was simple but terrifying. What if you could fold space around a weapon? What if you could teleport a warhead directly inside an enemy ship? For months she had failed. The equations did not work. The technology was not precise enough. The energy requirements were too high. Then on a quiet Tuesday morning, she solved the final problem. Project Eclipse is ready, she announced to Admiral Park through a secure communication channel. We need a target to test it. Park did not hesitate. There's a command ship at the edge of our sensor range, 2 million kilometers away, the Void Walker. It destroyed 3 of our destroyers last week. Nodded, she input the coordinates. She activated the weapon. 2 million kilometers away, a nuclear warhead appeared inside the Void Walker. Not near it, inside it, in the exact center of the ship between its reactor and its command deck. The explosion vaporized the vessel instantly. Stared at her screens in wonder. It worked. It actually worked. She had just created the most powerful weapon in human history. Dr. Admiral Park said quietly, "Can you build more of these?" "Yes," she replied. "Give me a month, I'll build you 100. The war was changing. At the beginning, humanity had been defending. Now they were attacking. At the beginning, the Dominion had been confident. Now they were afraid. The Supreme Arbiter, still alive aboard his new flagship, received reports of defeat after defeat. Human ships appearing from nowhere. Human weapons that physics. Human soldiers fighting with a fury his warriors had never seen. He began to understand something terrible. He had not attacked a primitive species. He had attacked something far more dangerous. He had attacked a species that had been preparing for war while pretending to be peaceful. And now that species was coming for his empire. In his private chambers, the Supreme Arbiter did something he had not done in 300 years. He prayed. The planet hung in space like a jewel made of purple crystal. It was the heart of the Dominion, home to their Supreme Arbiter, seat of their power for 10,000 years. No enemy had ever come within 1,000 light years of this world. No enemy had ever dared. Until today. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Never Again and watched the planet grow larger on his screens. He was 68 now, 1 year older than when this war had started. He felt every one of those years in his bones. He was tired, but he was not finished. Around his flagship, the Black Armada had gathered. Not 2,400 ships anymore. 4,100. New ships built in the secret shipyards. Ships crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth who had heard about the war and demanded to help. They had crossed the galaxy through a network of wormholes that Doctor had learned to create. What had once been a single secret passage was now a web of connections spanning the stars. Humanity could go anywhere, strike anywhere. And today, they had come to the most important place of all. "Admiral," Captain reported from the silence of tyrants, "enemy fleet is forming up. My sensors count 18,000 vessels. 18,000 ships, the entire remaining strength of the Dominion, gathered to defend there. Park had known they would face everything here. He had planned for it. All ships," he announced. "This is Admiral Park. Today we end this war, not with a negotiation, not with a compromise. Today we show the universe that humanity will never accept threats. We will never surrender our freedom. We will never kneel." He paused, looking at the enemy fleet filling his screens. "These beings came to our home. They demanded our submission. They told us we would be slaves or corpses. They made a mistake that day. They assumed we were weak because we were peaceful. They did not understand that peace can be a choice. We chose peace because we hoped for better, but we always prepared for worse." His voice grew hard. "Today is worse. Today we finish what they started. All ships attack." 4,000 human vessels surged forward. The battle for was the largest in human history. It was chaos and fire and death on a scale that made all previous wars look like children's games. 18,000 ships fought 4,000 ships across millions of kilometers of space. They fought with desperation. This was their home, their heart. They threw everything they had at the human fleet, energy weapons that could slice through armor, missiles that tracked their targets with intelligent minds, ships that rammed human vessels when their weapons failed. But humans had advantages that could not match. Captain led the vanguard, her silence of tyrants cutting through enemy formations like a knife through water. Her black hull made her nearly invisible on sensors. Her never stopped firing. When a carrier tried to flank her, she drove her ship directly at it, passing so close that the two vessels almost touched. Her gunners destroyed it at point-blank range. Lieutenant, promoted now to captain of her own destroyer Soul's Vengeance, commanded one of the strike groups targeting enemy command ships. She remembered her first kill, that carrier she had destroyed in the battle for Earth. Now she had lost count of how many she had destroyed. She felt no joy in it, only determination. Commander coordinated the entire battle from his carrier, his tactical mind tracking thousands of ships across 3 dimensions. He saw patterns the enemy could not see. He found weaknesses they did not know they had. When a gap appeared in the defensive line, he sent 200 ships through it before the enemy could react. Doctor had come with the fleet. Her Project Eclipse weapons were deployed across 50 ships. Every few minutes, a capital ship would simply vanish as a nuclear warhead appeared inside its hull. The enemy had no defense against weapons that ignored distance. And on the surface of itself, Sergeant Han was leading the ground assault. Her Marines had grown from 1 squad to 10,000 soldiers. They dropped from orbit in armored pods, crashing onto the crystalline surface of the alien world like metal rain. The defenders were waiting, but Han had learned their tactics. She had learned their weaknesses. She had learned how to beat them. "Spread out," she ordered her troops. "Hit them from every direction. Don't give them time to form their lines." Her soldiers obeyed. Power-armored humans sprinted across the purple landscape, firing weapons that could pierce crystalline bodies. They fell back, shocked by the ferocity of the attack. Han led her elite squad toward their objective, the planetary communication array. If they could capture it, they could broadcast to every world in the Dominion. They could send a message that no one would ever forget. The fight to reach the array was brutal. Han lost friends. She watched soldiers she had trained with for years die in flashes of energy fire. But she kept moving. She kept fighting. And finally, covered in dust and blood, she stood before the massive tower that controlled all communications. "We're in," she reported to Admiral Park. "What do you want me to say?" Park's response came immediately. "Tell them the truth. Tell them what happens when you threaten humanity." Han activated the communication system. Her voice went out to 3,000 star systems, to every soldier, every citizen, every being in the Dominion. "This is humanity," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion and grief. "You came to our home, you demanded our submission, you threatened our children. Look at your sky now. See those black ships. That is your answer. That is what happens when you threaten our world. We don't kneel, we never have, we never will. We rise. And we have come to teach you why you should have left us alone." In orbit, the battle was ending. Half the fleet was destroyed. The other half was trying to surrender or flee. Human ships were everywhere, their black hulls but unbroken. The Supreme Arbiter's flagship hung alone, surrounded by human dreadnoughts. His weapons were silent. His shields were failing. He had watched his empire's greatest fleet be torn apart by a species he had dismissed as primitives. Admiral Park opened a communication channel to the enemy flagship. "Supreme Arbiter," he said calmly, "your fleet is destroyed. Your planet is surrounded. Your soldiers are defeated. You have 2 choices. Surrender now and accept our terms, or refuse and watch as I order my ships to destroy everything you have ever built." For a long moment there was silence. Then the Supreme Arbiter's voice came through, filled with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "I surrender." The war was over. The terms of the treaty were simple. The Dominion would never approach human space again. They would release every species they had conquered who wanted freedom. They would pay for the damage they had caused, and they would remember. They would always remember. A month later, Admiral Park stood on Earth again. It was spring in Seoul, and cherry blossoms were falling from the trees. He had not seen cherry blossoms in over a year. He had forgotten how beautiful they were. A young reporter approached him, one of hundreds who wanted to interview the man who had saved humanity. "Admiral Park," she asked, "what message would you send to other species out there, other beings watching from the stars?" Park thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the crew members who had died, about the ships that had burned, about the terrible cost of the victory they had won. "We didn't want this," he finally said. "We were happy growing quietly among our planets. We hoped to meet friends in the universe." He looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, invisible against the blue, the Black Armada still patrolled, silent, watchful, ready. But we prepared for enemies. So here is our message to anyone watching. Come in peace and we will welcome you. Come with open hands and we will share everything we have. Come as friends and you will find no better friends in the galaxy. His voice hardened. "But come with threats, come with demands, come to our home and tell us to kneel." He smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. "Come with threats and you will meet the Black Armada. You will learn what we learned long ago. We don't kneel, we never kneel." He turned and walked away, leaving the reporter standing under the cherry blossoms. Above the Earth, the black ships waited in silence. Humanity's secret, humanity's shield, ready for whatever came next. Because the universe was vast, and there were other empires out there, other threats, other beings who might one day look at the pale blue dot and think it would be easy prey. They would learn. Sooner or later they would all learn. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity never will.